I arrived early at my brother's barbecue with my grandmother's green chili potato salad and the biggest career news of my life. Before I reached the backyard, I heard my family laughing about how much easier the inheritance would be if I died in a car accident. I was holding a bowl of green chili potato salad when I found out my family wished I was dead. Not metaphorically. Not in that careless way people sometimes say cruel things and expect Tone to do the work of forgiveness afterward. Literally. Specifically. With laughter. I had driven 40 minutes across Albuquerque in my dark blue Toyota Camry, the one with air conditioning that only works properly on the passenger side, which meant the potato salad arrived more comfortable than I did. The bowl sat belted into the front seat like a child because Grandma Isabel's green chili potato salad was not something you let slide around on floor mats. It was her recipe. Roasted hatch chili, red potatoes, a little mustard, too much black pepper, according to everyone except the people with taste. She used to make it for every family barbecue, and after she died, I became the one who brought it. No one asked me to. That was part of the problem. I was still volunteering love to people who treated it like obligation. I had on a new navy linen button-down and clean jeans, both bought 2 days earlier because I wanted to look decent when I told them the news. 11 days before that barbecue, I had been promoted to Director of Regional Marketing. 7 properties, 14 people reporting to me, the largest salary I had ever earned. The kind of achievement a man pretends he does not need his family to care about until he is driving across town with potato salad, rehearsing how casually he will mention it. I got to Ruben's house at 4:25 p.m., 35 minutes early. Because I arrive early. I have arrived early my entire life. Doctor appointments, work meetings, airport pickups, family events where everyone else treated the start time as a loose emotional suggestion. My family never called that considerate. They called it Matt being Matt. Ruben had texted everyone the front door code, so I let myself in. The house smelled like charcoal smoke, beer, and the lemon cleaner Elena always claimed was too strong while continuing to use enough of it to disinfect a bus station. I walked through the kitchen to put the bowl in the fridge. That was when I heard them. The backyard was already full. I could see shapes moving beyond the screen door. Ruben near the grill, Elena's voice cutting through the warm air, Aunt Gloria's laugh, dry and sharp, Marco and Louise somewhere near the patio table, the cousin chorus already in position. They were talking about me. He's only coming to brag about that corporate promotion, Ruben said. Not annoyed. Comfortable. That was the part that made my hand tighten on the bowl. Comfortable contempt has a different sound than anger. Anger still has heat in it. This was worn smooth from use. Elena laughed. Remember when he got that hotel marketing job and acted like he was running the whole city? He always thought he was better, Aunt Gloria said. Even as a kid, always walking around like the rest of us were too small for him. Marco said something I could not catch. Luis laughed anyway. That was his function. I stood in the kitchen with my hand an inch from the screen door handle. I should have opened it. I should have stepped into the yard and let silence do what silence does when guilt has no time to prepare. But I stayed there. Because some part of me needed the whole thing. Needed enough that I could never again tell myself it was teasing or family humor or one bad comment pulled out of context. Then Elena said it. Lightly. Casually. Like she was commenting on the weather. Honestly, it would be easier if he got into an accident and never made it here. Then we could all stop pretending and just deal with the inheritance. The backyard exploded. Full laughter. Ruben. Gloria. Marco. Louise. All of them. No hesitation. No one saying, Elena, come on. No one lowering their voice, because even cruelty has borders when people still recognize shame. Just my family laughing at the idea of me dying before dinner. I set Grandma Isabel's potato salad on the kitchen counter. Carefully. Then I walked out the front door. I made it 2 blocks. That was all. 2 blocks before my hands stopped behaving like hands and became something useless on the steering wheel. I pulled under a cottonwood tree on a side street where the houses were quiet and the afternoon heat pressed against the windshield like a palm. The Camry's engine ticked softly after I turned it off. Somewhere behind me, my grandmother's potato salad was sitting on Ruben's kitchen counter, still covered in plastic wrap, still made with the kind of care I kept offering people who had just laughed at my death. That was when I cried. Not loud. Not the way people cry in movies, with rain or music or someone running after them. It was worse than that. It was quiet and ugly and practical, like my body had decided there was no longer any point in helping me pretend. I was not crying because I was surprised. That would have been easier. I was crying because I was not surprised at all. Because 31 years of jokes, eye rolls, side comments, Christmas dinners, Easter afternoons, and Matt thinks he's better than us had finally arranged themselves into a sentence clear enough that even I could not soften it. They did not misunderstand me. They resented me. And when they thought I was not there to hear it, they said the clean part out loud. I wiped my face with the heel of my hand. Then I called Marcus. Let me tell you who I am, because the story needs that before it can make sense. My name is Mateo Alvarez. Most people call me Matt. I am 35 years old, and I have a communications degree from the University of New Mexico, which Aunt Gloria once described as one of those talking degrees, as if language were not the thing people used to build every insult she had ever aimed at me. I have spent 11 years in marketing. Hospitality first, then regional campaigns, then commercial partnerships for hotel groups, trying to make properties feel less like buildings and more like places people wanted to remember. I am good at it. That sentence took me years to say without apologizing inside my own head. 11 days before Ruben's barbecue, I was promoted to Director of Regional Marketing for Desert Crown Hospitality Group. 7 properties across New Mexico and West Texas. 14 people reporting to me. A compensation package large enough that I read the offer letter twice in my parked car before I trusted it. It was the biggest professional achievement of my life. And the first thing I wanted to do was tell my family. That is the part one I'm least proud of now. Not the promotion. The wanting. I wanted Ruben to clap me on the shoulder and call me kid, even though I had not been a kid for 20 years. I wanted Elena to make some joke that was actually kind underneath. I wanted Aunt Gloria to say nothing at all if kindness was too much to ask. I wanted, at 35 years old, to walk into a backyard with potato salad and good news and be met like a man who belonged there. Instead, I stood behind a screen door and learned what my absence was worth to them. More than my presence had ever been. The Alvarez family has a shape. Every family does, though most people inside one do not see it clearly because they mistake repetition for truth. In ours, Ruben was the center. He was 52, 14 years older than me, and had been treated like the family's natural authority since our father died 12 years ago. Some of that made sense at first. Ruben was the oldest. He had the loudest voice. He owned a landscaping and hardscape business that did well enough for people to describe him as solid, which in my family meant he had a truck, employees, and opinions nobody interrupted. He lived in the North Valley house. Grandma Isabel's house. The house my grandparents bought in 1974, back when that part of Albuquerque still felt more rural than valuable. 4 bedrooms, adobe walls, saltillo tile, a long backyard where my grandfather had grown tomatoes, squash, and too many chili plants because he believed abundance was a virtue when it came from dirt. That house had become the family center before I was born. Birthdays, barbecues, Christmas Eve, graduation parties, arguments that started in the kitchen and traveled to the driveway. When Grandpa died, Grandma Isabel let Reuben stay there for a while. That was how she put it. A while turned into 8 years. No lease, no rent, no real discussion. Reuben simply began speaking about the house as if occupancy were a slow form of ownership. No one challenged that. Challenging Reuben was not how the family worked. Elena was the second force. 48, twice divorced. Beautiful when she was young in a way that taught her early that people forgive cruelty faster when it arrives wearing charm. She was still funny. I will give her that. Sometimes genuinely funny. Sharp enough to make a room follow her before anyone realized where she was leading it. When Elena laughed, the family adjusted itself around the sound. Aunt Gloria was 69, our father's older sister, and had spent my entire life confusing bitterness with wisdom. She called herself honest. People like that always do. What she meant was that she had reached an age where she expected her cruelty to be treated like a personality trait instead of a choice. Then there were Marco and Luis. Cousins. Gloria's sons. They had the collective energy of men still emotionally wearing Letterman jackets no longer visible to anyone else. Neither of them led anything. They did not need to. Their role was easier. They laughed when Reuben laughed, agreed when Gloria judged, nodded when Elena cut someone down. They were the chorus. And I was the problem. Not because I had done anything dramatic. That would have been cleaner. I was the problem because I had left. I got good grades. I went to college. I worked internships. I learned how to speak in conference rooms without shrinking. I built a career in places where nobody knew the childhood nickname Elena had used when she wanted to make me small. To my family, ambition was not effort. It was accusation. Every step I took away from the version of me they understood became proof that I thought I was better than them. I did not. For years, I tried to prove that. I showed up early, brought food, remembered birthdays, sat through jokes about being Mr. Corporate, and smiled like I was mature enough not to mind. I made myself useful, available, non-threatening. It did not help. Because they did not need me to be arrogant in order to resent me. They only needed me to become difficult to pity. That was the role I had broken. And families do not forgive broken roles easily. Grandma Isabel died 16 months before the barbecue. She was 84, and she had the kind of mind people call sharp because they do not know what else to do with an old woman who still notices everything. She noticed who visited, who called, who asked for favors before asking how she slept, who looked around her house as if the walls were already future property. She noticed me too. Every Sunday I called her. Not because I was better than anyone else. Because I liked talking to her. Grandma Isabel had lived enough life to make ordinary questions interesting. If you asked whether she needed anything, she would say no, because pride had raised her before comfort ever got a chance. But if you asked about her week, she would tell you about the neighbor's lemon tree, the priest's bad homily, the price of tomatoes, the old photograph she found in a drawer, and what my grandfather had said the day it was taken. So I asked about her life. For years. Sometimes from hotel parking lots, sometimes from airports, sometimes from my apartment with laundry half folded on the couch. She would answer on the second ring and say, "Mateo, tell me something that is not about work." She was the only person in my family who called me Mateo without making it sound like a correction. 11 days before Reuben's barbecue, I was sitting in my office parking garage when Marina Castillo called. Marina had been my grandmother's attorney for 10 years. Estate and property law, Bernalillo County, precise voice, no wasted softness. She told me probate had finalized. Then she told me Grandma Isabel had left me the North Valley house. Not Reuben. Not Elena. Not the family collectively. Me. Fee simple. Clean title. No trust. No conditions. The house was worth about $675,000. I sat in my parked car for 22 minutes after the call ended, staring at the concrete wall in front of me while the world quietly rearranged itself. That house was not just property. It was where my family gathered to decide who belonged. And Grandma Isabel had left it to the one person they kept pushing outside. Marina asked if I wanted her to read the note. I said yes because my mouth was too dry to say anything longer. It's brief, she told me. Then she read 6 sentences in my grandmother's handwriting. The house belongs to the person who always asked about my life, not the people waiting for my things. Your father would have understood this, even if he would have been sad about what the family became after him. Reuben will make noise. Elena will perform being wounded because that is easier than being accountable. Let them. You know what is right, Mateo, and when the time comes, I trust you to do it without becoming cruel. Marina stopped reading. The inside of my car went very quiet. I had seen my grandmother's handwriting my whole life. Birthday cards, grocery lists, church envelopes, notes taped to casserole dishes telling people how long to heat something and which cousin was not allowed to take it home without returning the dish. Hearing those words read by a lawyer made them feel heavier. Not legal. Sacred in the practical way Grandma Isabel made things sacred. She had not left me the house because I was special. She left it to me because I had paid attention. That distinction mattered. I had not told anyone yet. Not Reuben, not Elena, not Marcus, not even myself completely. For 11 days, I carried that knowledge around like a loaded object, trying to understand what doing the right thing meant when the right thing involved the house my brother lived in, a family that assumed it would always be theirs, and a grandmother who had trusted me not to confuse fairness with surrender. I thought the barbecue might be the time. Then I heard them laughing behind the screen door. Marcus Reed has been my best friend for 16 years. We met during sophomore year at the University of New Mexico in a communications elective neither of us wanted to take. He was sitting 2 rows behind me, whispering brutally accurate commentary about the professor's PowerPoint transitions, and I laughed so hard I had to pretend I was coughing. That was how most important friendships begin, I think. Not with grand loyalty. With one person making the unbearable slightly less unbearable. Marcus became the person who knew every version of me and did not require any of them to apologize before entering a room. He had seen me broke, arrogant, ashamed, ambitious, rejected, promoted, and drunk on a patio after a breakup I handled badly. He knew my family patterns the way a man learns the map of a dangerous road his friend keeps insisting is safe. When I called him from under that cottonwood tree, he answered on the first ring. You okay? No. That was all I had. He did not fill the silence. Good friends know when not to rescue you from saying the difficult part. I told him everything in order. The potato salad, the screen door, Reuben's voice, Elena's accident comment, the laughter, all of it. When I finished, Marcus was quiet for several seconds. Then he said, "Where are you?" 2 blocks from Reuben's house. I'm coming. No, I said. Matt. No, I need you to listen. There was a pause. Then he exhaled. You have the voice. What voice? The one where you already made a decision and you're pretending I'm part of the discussion. He was not wrong. Before Marcus became a healthcare data analyst, he had spent 4 years as a patient access coordinator at Sandia Regional Medical Center. He knew hospital language, the cadence, the careful tone, the professional distance people use when delivering urgent news without feeding panic. Measured, clinical, authoritative enough to make the body believe before the mind can argue. We met 20 minutes later at a cafe on Central Avenue, 3 miles from Ruben's house. Marcus ordered black coffee. I ordered nothing because my stomach had closed around itself like a fist. "This is ugly," he said. "I know. It's going to hurt them." They laughed about me dying. He looked at me for a long moment. Not judging. Measuring the damage. "What exactly do you want to know?" he asked. That question mattered. Because anger wanted one answer. Pain wanted another. But the truth was simpler. I want to see who they become when they think the joke came true. Marcus leaned back. "That's a dangerous thing to learn." "I think I already learned it." "No," he said. "You heard it. That's different." At 5:07, we had the plan. At 5:10, Marcus stepped outside the cafe, stood near the curb with his phone to his ear, and became someone no one in my family knew how to doubt. His voice changed completely. Professional. Controlled. Just enough urgency to make every word land. 90 seconds later, he came back inside. He sat across from me and placed his phone face down on the table. "Elena's already screaming," he said. "Sandia Regional Medical Center sits near the east side of Albuquerque, all glass, concrete, and controlled urgency." I had passed it dozens of times without thinking about what it looked like to people arriving there in panic. That afternoon, from the third level of the parking structure across the street, it looked less like a hospital and more like a stage someone had built for consequences. Marcus pulled into an east-facing spot at 5:25. From there, we could see the emergency entrance clearly. Sliding doors, ambulance bay, security desk through the glass. People moving with the strange speed hospitals create, where some are rushing because life demands it and others are walking slowly because their bodies have not caught up to what their minds have just heard. I had binoculars in my trunk. A pair of Nikons I bought for a hiking trip in Taos the year before and barely used because Marcus had spent the entire hike informing me that birdwatching was just surveillance with better branding. Now they were perfect. Marcus's phone started lighting up at 5:12 and had not stopped. He read the messages out loud in the flat voice he used when numbers were bad, but still had to be understood. "Elena, oh my God, oh my God. What happened?" "Ruben, what hospital? Answer me." "Marco, is this real?" "Luis, who called? Is Matt okay?" Then Marcus paused. I looked at him. He read the next one. "Aunt Gloria, I knew something was off today. I felt it. Also, are we sure he's not doing this for attention?" I laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because some reactions are so predictable, they become their own kind of violence. "Even now," Marcus said. "Even now." The messages kept coming. Elena wanted to know whether she should call my work. Ruben said they were leaving now. Marco asked if anyone had my medical information. Luis asked which entrance. Gloria sent 3 prayer emojis, then immediately asked whether someone had moved the ribs away from the heat. I sat in the passenger seat and listened to the people who had laughed at my imagined death become frantic over its possibility. That was the part one had not expected to hurt. Their panic was real. I could feel that. And somehow that made it worse. Because it meant they were capable of caring. They just treated their care like something I had no right to receive while I was alive and standing in front of them. At 5:40, Ruben's truck came hard around the corner. Black Ford F-150. Lifted slightly, because Ruben liked vehicles that made practical problems larger and called it preference. He pulled to the curb in front of the emergency entrance, so fast the front tire bumped the concrete. The driver's door flew open before the engine was off. Actually, it never turned off. The truck sat there running, door wide open, headlights still on in the late afternoon sun, as if even the machine had been abandoned mid-thought. Ruben ran. I had never seen my brother run like that. Not at family softball games. Not when one of his kids wandered too close to the street years ago. Not even when Grandma Isabel fell in the kitchen and Elena screamed for help before anyone knew whether she was hurt. This was different. This was a man whose body had outrun his pride. He went through the emergency doors with both hands half raised, already talking before the glass closed behind him. Elena got out of the passenger side a second later. She did not look like the woman from the backyard. No bright cruelty, no easy laugh, no social command. She looked pale and unprepared, one hand over her mouth, the other clutching her phone so tightly I could see the white of her knuckles through the binoculars. She stood on the sidewalk for 3 seconds, frozen in front of the doors. Then she followed him inside. Marcus did not say anything. Neither did I. A gray Jeep pulled in next. Marco driving, Luis beside him. Marco parked crooked across 2 spaces and did not correct it. Luis got out first, looking around like the answer might be written somewhere on the building. Then Aunt Gloria arrived in her beige Buick. She parked badly, of course. Half over the line. Even in crisis, some people remain consistent. She climbed out slowly, one hand pressed to her chest, her face arranged into that dramatic grief old relatives sometimes wear before they know whether grief has earned the costume. Marco took her elbow. Luis hovered uselessly. Together, they went inside. One by one. The whole backyard. The people who had laughed at Elena's accident comment, now entering a hospital to ask whether that accident had happened. I watched them through the binoculars until the doors closed behind the last of them. The emergency entrance kept moving. A nurse came out. A man with a bandaged hand walked in. A young mother carried a sleeping child against her shoulder. Life went on around the private disaster my family believed they had arrived to face. I lowered the binoculars. My hands were steady now. That surprised me. Marcus looked at me carefully. "You okay?" "No," I said. But for the first time that day, no did not mean broken. It meant awake. At 6:02, Ruben came back outside alone. I saw him before my phone rang. He stepped through the emergency doors with one hand on the back of his head, like he was physically trying to keep himself from coming apart. He stood under the covered entrance, turned once toward the ambulance bay, then toward the parking structure across the street. Not at me. He could not have known where I was, but in my direction. The phone in his hand lit up. Mine rang. Marcus glanced at the screen. "Don't answer if you're not ready." "I'm ready enough." That was not the same thing. I answered. "Matt." His voice was wrecked. I had never heard Ruben sound like that. Not when our father died. Not when Grandma Isabel got sick. Ruben usually turned fear into orders before anyone could notice it was fear. This time, there was no order in him yet. Just damage. "Where are you?" he said. "The hospital has no record of you. Nobody knows what we're talking about. The desk keeps asking for departments, and I don't. Matt, what the hell is going on?" I watched him from across the street through the windshield. "I'm fine." The silence on the line changed shape. "What?" "I'm fine," I said. "I've been in the parking garage across the street for the last 40 minutes watching all of you." There was a pause, so long the whole city seemed to enter it. Then Ruben turned slowly toward the parking structure. His face was too far away to read clearly, but I could see his body understand before his mouth did. You did this on purpose. The grief left his voice fast. Too fast. That mattered. Yes, I said. You made us think you were dead. I arrived at your house at 4:25, I said. I walked in through the front door. I heard every word coming from the backyard. He said nothing. Ruben, I heard Elena say it would be easier if I got into an accident and never made it there. I heard her say you could all stop pretending and deal with the inheritance. Still nothing. I heard you laugh. His breathing came harder through the phone. You have no idea what you just did, he said. I know exactly what I did. Elena is hysterical. Gloria almost collapsed in the waiting room. Do you understand that? We thought you were dead. I know. What kind of man does this to his family? I looked down at the emergency entrance. Through the glass, I could see Elena moving toward the doors. Marco behind her, Gloria gesturing with one hand, already rebuilding the story around herself. What kind of family laughs first? I asked. Ruben did not answer. He did not have to. The answer was standing in the hospital parking lot, alive and watching him. Ruben looked up at the parking structure like he might be able to find me by force of anger alone. I did not wave. That seemed important. Some confrontations need distance, so people cannot confuse volume with truth. You crossed a line, he said. I heard the line before I crossed anything. Do you understand what Elena looked like in there? I saw her. She was crying, Matt. So, the word came out flatter than I expected. Ruben made a sound like I had slapped him. So, he said, that's your answer? My answer is that Elena was laughing at 4:25 and crying by 5:40. I'm interested in the part that happened first. She didn't mean it like that. There is not a better way to mean wishing your brother would die in a car accident. You know how she talks. Yes, I said. That is the problem. I know exactly how she talks. I have known for 31 years. Behind him, the emergency doors opened. Elena stepped out with Marco close behind her. Her face was red and wet, but not soft. Even from across the street, I could see her anger putting itself together faster than remorse ever would have. Ruben lowered his voice. You scared the hell out of everyone. I came to your house with potato salad and good news. He went quiet. I kept my eyes on him through the windshield. I got promoted 11 days ago. Director of Regional Marketing. 7 properties. 14 people. Biggest thing I've ever done professionally. I bought a new shirt because I wanted to look decent when I told you. No answer. I was early because I thought helping before the barbecue started might make me feel less like an outsider. Ruben turned slightly away from the parking structure. Not enough. Just enough to avoid the full shape of what I was saying. But before I got to the door, I continued. You were already explaining me to each other, mocking me, reducing everything I worked for into arrogance, because that's easier than admitting I built something without your permission. Matt. No. I heard Elena say it would be easier if I got into an accident and never made it there. I heard Aunt Gloria laugh. I heard Marco and Luis laugh. I heard you laugh. Ruben's jaw tightened. It was a joke. That was the moment something in me cooled completely. Not died. Not broke. Cooled. No, I said. A joke gives the person it hurts somewhere to stand. That was a wish with an audience. Elena had reached Ruben now. She was close enough that I heard her through his phone before he moved it away. Is that him? Let me talk to him. Not yet, Ruben said. For once, I said, don't hand her the room just because she demands it. He froze. I had never said anything like that to him before. I should have, years earlier. I'm done pretending this family is only cruel by accident, I said. You thought I wasn't listening. That is the only reason I heard the truth. Elena took the phone anyway. That was Elena's gift. She never needed permission when she believed the room already belonged to her. What is wrong with you? She said. Her voice was wet from crying, but sharp underneath. The tears had not softened her. They had only given her anger something to wear. You let us think you were dead. I let you meet the sentence you laughed at. That is sick. No, I said. Sick was saying it would be easier if I got into an accident before I made it to dinner. That was not what I meant. You said it clearly. You heard one comment out of context. I heard the laughter after it. That stopped her for half a second. Only half. People like Elena recover quickly when guilt threatens to become useful. You have always done this, she said. You take everything personally. You turn every little thing into proof that everyone is against you. Behind her, Aunt Gloria's voice rose loud enough for the phone to catch it. He's always been dramatic, since he was a boy, always needing attention. Then Marco. This is insane, man. Then Luis, because Luis had never met an original thought he was willing to risk. Completely insane. There it was. The chorus. Same rhythm. Same rolls. Same old machinery starting up because I was no longer possibly dead, which meant I was available to be blamed. I watched them from the parking structure as they gathered around Ruben's phone like witnesses at a trial where the verdict had been written years before the evidence arrived. Elena kept going. You know what you did to us? You know what that felt like? Yes, I said. That was the point. You're admitting it? I wanted to know what grief looked like on people who laughed when they imagined having a reason for it. Silence moved through them. Not remorse. Discomfort. There is a difference. Aunt Gloria said something about me needing help. Marco said I had gone too far. Luis muttered that this was typical. Typical. That word almost made me smile. Not because it amused me. Because if a man finally stops letting his family humiliate him in private and blame him in public, they will often call the boundary a pattern before they call the cruelty one. I looked down at them. Small from that distance. Angry. Alive. Still certain the problem was the mirror, not what it showed. I'm leaving the potato salad on Ruben's counter, I said. Consider it my last contribution to pretending this family was only joking. Then I hung up. For a while, neither of us spoke. Marcus sat behind the wheel with both hands loose at the bottom of it, looking down at the emergency entrance where my family was still gathered in the heat. Ruben had the phone lowered now. Elena was talking with both hands, which meant she had already begun translating guilt into outrage. Aunt Gloria stood beside her like a monument to bad faith. Marco and Luis hovered close enough to belong to the anger without having to own any of it. Marcus finally looked at me. Are you going to tell them about the house? I kept my eyes on the people below us. The people who had laughed about me dying. The people who were still planning to spend every Christmas, every birthday, every Sunday barbecue in a house they believed was theirs by family gravity. They did not know Grandma Isabel had changed everything. They did not know the deed had already been filed. They did not know the man they had wished out of the story was now the legal owner of the place where they had told it. I watched Ruben look toward the parking structure again. Then I shook my head. Not today, I said. Marcus nodded once. He understood. Some truths should not be thrown. Some truths should be delivered with paperwork. I need to tell you about Marina Castillo. because the house matters, and because Grandma Isabel deserves precision. Marina had been my grandmother's attorney for 10 years. Estate work, property transfers, probate disputes, the kind of law that looks boring from the outside until a family decides money gives them permission to become honest. Her office was in a low-glass building near downtown Albuquerque, the sort of place with quiet carpet, framed certificates, and reception furniture designed to make grief sit upright. The first time I met her, 11 days before the barbecue, she had already been careful with me. Not soft. Careful. There is a difference. Softness tries to make hard news feel less hard. Carefulness respects that the news is heavy and hands it to you without dropping it. She told me Grandma Isabel had updated her will 13 months before she died. That mattered. It was before the final diagnosis became public, before the family could say illness made her confused, before Ruben could claim someone pressured her, before Elena could perform moral injury over paperwork she had never bothered to understand. Marina said Isabel came in after a Thanksgiving dinner. I had not been there that year. I was in Denver for a property launch, answering emails from a hotel lobby and feeling guilty about missing family, because guilt was one of the ways I kept belonging to people who did not treat me like I belonged. Marina did not tell me exactly what my grandmother heard. She said only this: "Your grandmother described a conversation about you that clarified her estate plan." Clarified. That was the word. Not changed. Clarified. Grandma Isabel had already known the shape of the family. Thanksgiving only gave it language. The house was a 4-bedroom adobe in Albuquerque's North Valley, built in the early 70s, with saltillo tile, old Vegas, a long backyard, and a side gate that never latched correctly unless you lifted it with your knee. Current market value, approximately $675,000. The deed transferred to me through probate. Fee simple ownership. Clean title. No trust. No shared family arrangement. No condition that I allow gatherings, barbecues, holidays, or Ruben's sense of entitlement to continue living there rent-free. Mine. Marina said that word only once. But once was enough. For a strange second, I did not feel powerful. I felt responsible. That house had held birthdays, Christmas mornings, arguments, funerals, and the smell of my grandmother's beans simmering on the stove. It had also held every small humiliation I had taught myself to survive quietly. Now the law said it belonged to me. And my family was still standing in its backyard, laughing like they were waiting for me to disappear from something I had already inherited. The complication was Ruben. It was always going to be Ruben. He had lived in the North Valley house for 8 years by then. After Grandpa Arturo died, Grandma Isabel told him he could stay for a while. That was the phrase she used, according to Marina and according to everyone who had been around at the time. For a while. Families should be careful with phrases like that. They sound generous when they are spoken and become legal fog when enough years pass around them. Ruben moved in with 2 duffel bags, a toolbox, and the story that he was helping Grandma Isabel maintain the place. At first, maybe that was partly true. He fixed a loose railing near the back steps, replaced a garbage disposal, patched a section of stucco after a winter storm opened a crack near the kitchen window. But helping became staying. Staying became belonging. And belonging, in Ruben's mind, became ownership. He paid no rent. Not once. Grandma Isabel never asked him to, and because she never asked, Ruben decided that meant the subject had been settled in his favor. He covered utilities sometimes, bought groceries occasionally, repaired things that broke because he was the adult man living there, and those things affected his own comfort too. But rent? Mortgage? Property taxes? No. Over the years, he made improvements he talked about constantly. New kitchen flooring. A renovated primary bathroom. A deck off the back that he built with Marco and Luis over 2 weekends, then described afterward as if he had personally restored Versailles. He called those things investments. Marina called them undocumented improvements made by an occupant without a lease. That was the difference between family language and legal language. Family language bends toward whoever is loudest. Legal language, when properly documented, has less patience for volume. Ruben had no deed, no lease, no ownership interest, no written agreement, no contract giving him the right to remain indefinitely because he had confused Grandma Isabel's kindness with a transfer of property. Marina explained it plainly. He is a tenant at will. The phrase sounded too small for the amount of noise it was going to create. A tenant at will. That was what my brother had become in the house he had already started calling his future. That Sunday, I read everything. Not skimmed. Read. Probate filing, deed transfer, county assessor records, property tax history, the recorder's office entry, every document Marina had sent, and every public record I could access without asking anyone for permission. I read them the way I read marketing performance reports when a campaign is failing and everyone in the room wants to blame the weather. Slowly, line by line. No emotion first. Just facts. That was how I found the Helic. $28,400. It had been opened in 2018 for a roof replacement and a new swamp cooler system after one of those summers where Albuquerque heat stopped feeling like weather and started feeling like punishment. I remembered that year. Grandma Isabel had complained about the contractor tracking dust through the hallway, then admitted he had done good work because she was fair even when irritated. The balance was still there. Not enormous. Not ruinous. But real. And now it belonged to me. The house was mine. So was the debt attached to it. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and stared at the number until it stopped being a number and became a shape. Ruben had lived there 8 years. 8 years of sleeping under that roof. 8 years of using that cooled air. 8 years of hosting barbecues, Christmas Eve, birthdays, arguments, and casual cruelty inside walls he did not own. He had not paid rent. He had not paid the mortgage balance. He had not paid property tax. He had repaired things when they affected him, then called those repairs investment. But the actual obligation had sat quietly in Grandma Isabel's name until probate moved it into mine. That was the part that clarified me. Not the money. The entitlement. Ruben had accepted the comfort of ownership without the burden of it. He had let an old woman carry the legal weight while he practiced saying, "When this place comes to me," like repetition could become title. I printed the Helic record. Then I placed it in a folder with the deed, the probate notice, and Marina's email. Some families argue in circles. I was done with circles. I wanted paper. Monday morning, I was in Marina Castillo's office. The same low-glass building near downtown Albuquerque. The same quiet carpet. The same receptionist who spoke softly, as if the entire place had been designed around people receiving news they could not afford to mishandle. Marina had a legal pad in front of her, reading glasses low on her nose, and the calm expression of a woman who had already done the preliminary thinking and was now prepared to hand me the clean version. I appreciated that. By then, I had spent 2 nights inside the dirty version. The screen door. The laughter. Ruben's anger. Elena's voice calling me sick because I had made them feel, for 40 minutes, the exact death she had joked about. And then the records. The deed. The helic. The fact that my brother had been living inside my grandmother's generosity for 8 years and had mistaken it for destiny. I want to understand every option, I said. Marina nodded once. No surprise. No judgment. Option 1, she said. You allow Ruben to remain as a tenant at will for now and begin negotiating a formal lease. That would be the least disruptive, but it keeps the current ambiguity alive until something is signed. Which means he keeps acting like the house is his. It may encourage that, yes. Option 2. We issue a 60-day notice immediately. Clean, direct, legally supported. If he refuses to leave or refuses to formalize an agreement, we proceed from there. I looked at the folder on her desk. That sounds like war. It sounds like notice, Marina said. War is what families often decide notice means. That sentence stayed with me. She turned a page on her legal pad. Option 3 is not a legal requirement, but your grandmother gave me instructions to present it before you decide. My stomach tightened. There's more. A letter. Marina opened the folder and removed 2 pages. Not court paper. Not typed. My grandmother's handwriting. Blue ink. Careful lines. The same handwriting that had labeled freezer containers, birthday cards, and church donation envelopes. She asked that I hold this until probate was complete, Marina said. She described it as guidance, not control. I did not touch it right away. That surprised me. For 2 days, I had wanted facts. Clear facts. Hard facts. Paperwork strong enough to hold against Ruben's volume and Elena's performance. But seeing my grandmother's handwriting changed the air in the room. Facts were easy compared to being trusted. What did she want me to know? I asked. Marina slid the letter across the desk. I think she wanted you to understand the difference between what people ask for and what they assume is already theirs. I read my grandmother's letter in Marina Castillo's office with both hands on the paper. That was not sentimental. It was practical. My hands needed something to do. Grandma Isabel's handwriting had always been deliberate. Not pretty exactly, but steady. The handwriting of a woman who had balanced checkbooks at a kitchen table, labeled leftovers in masking tape, and wrote birthday cards with enough pressure to leave grooves in the paper. Mateo, I know this house will make noise after I am gone. That was the first line. Not mine. Will. She had known. I kept reading. Ruben has spoken about this place as if time spent inside a thing turns into ownership of it. He says, when this place comes to me, in the same tone a man uses to discuss whether he expects by evening. He does not ask what I want. He does not ask what your grandfather and I built. He does not ask what would honor the people who kept this roof standing before he ever slept under it. He did not ask. He assumed. I stopped there. Because that sentence did something to me. It reached backward through every family barbecue, every Christmas Eve, every conversation where Ruben leaned against a kitchen counter in a house he did not own and spoke about future renovations like my grandmother had already become a legal inconvenience waiting to be removed. He did not ask. He assumed. Grandma Isabel continued. There is a difference between asking and assuming, Mateo. Asking leaves room for another person's dignity. Assuming walks into that dignity with dirty shoes and calls the mess inheritance. I looked up from the page. Marina was watching me quietly, not intruding. I looked back down. Your brother is not evil. I want you to remember that, because anger makes people easier to judge than they are. But he has become careless with what was given to him. Carelessness becomes entitlement when no one interrupts it. That sounded exactly like her. Fair enough to hurt. Sharp enough to stay. She wrote that Elena would be angry because Elena understood attention better than accountability. Aunt Gloria would call the decision unfair because unfair was the word she used whenever a boundary landed where her opinion expected a door. Marco and Luis would follow the loudest voice because that was what they had practiced for years. Then came the part one had to read twice. I am not leaving you this house so you can punish them. I am leaving it to you because you are the one person in this family who still understands that property is not the same thing as belonging. A house can hold people who do not deserve it. A deed can correct what habit has disguised. I felt something move in my chest. Not victory. Responsibility again. The last paragraph was only 3 lines. Do what is right. Do not confuse right with painless. And do not let anyone teach you that being fair means handing your life back to the people who laughed while taking from it. I folded the letter slowly. For a long time, I said nothing. Then I looked at Marina. He really did assume it was his, I said. Marina nodded. Yes. And she knew. She knew. I looked down at my grandmother's handwriting one more time. Then I understood what she had left me. Not just the house. Permission to stop pretending assumption was love. I read Grandma Isabel's letter one more time before I made the decision. Not because I did not understand it. Because I wanted to be careful with it. There are moments when anger gives you an option that feels clean because it is sharp. Send the notice. Change the locks after 60 days. Let Ruben learn the difference between family confidence and legal reality in the hardest possible way. I could have done that. Marina made that clear. The law was not confused. The title was mine. The helic was mine. The responsibility was mine. Ruben's belief that 8 years in the house had somehow turned into ownership was not a legal argument. It was a family habit wearing boots. But Grandma Isabel had not raised me to confuse power with wisdom. And she had not left me the house so I could become theatrical with pain. I looked at Marina. I want the 60-day notice prepared, I said. She wrote that down. Delivered formally? Yes. Certified mail and processed server? Yes. My voice did not shake. Alongside that, I want to offer him a lease. Marina paused. What kind of lease? 3 years, I said, below market rate. Enough that he knows the house is not free anymore, but not so much that I am pretending the last 8 years didn't happen. She watched me over her glasses. Explain that. I leaned back and thought about the deck Ruben bragged about, the kitchen floor, the bathroom tile, the loose railing he fixed when Grandma Isabel was still alive. I thought about the rent he had not paid, the helic he had ignored, the property taxes he had never carried, the way he used maintenance as proof of ownership while leaving the actual burden to an old woman and then to me. I don't want cruelty, I said. I want honesty. Marina's pen stayed still. Grandma let him live there rent-free. That was her choice. I'm not going to rewrite her generosity just because I'm angry, but I'm also not going to inherit the debt and the title while Ruben keeps inheriting the comfort. Marina nodded slowly. So the notice stands if he refuses? Yes. And if he accepts the lease? Then he pays rent. He follows terms. He stops calling it his house unless he buys it from me. Saying that felt strange. His house. My house. For years, I had let the family use language like gravity. Now I was learning language could also be offense. Marina wrote for several seconds. Then she said, "That is a fair offer." I looked down at my grandmother's folded letter. Good, I said, because I'm done being generous in ways people mistake for surrender. Reuben called 11 days after the barbecue. Not about the house. He did not know about the house yet. Marina was still preparing the notice and lease offer, and I had not said a word to anyone in the family since the hospital parking garage. That silence had apparently been interpreted as weakness or guilt. It was neither. It was preparation. When Reuben's name appeared on my phone, I let it ring twice before answering. "Matt," he said. His voice had that rehearsed weight people use when they have spent several days convincing themselves they are the reasonable one. "Reuben, we need to talk about what you did." There it was. No greeting. No question. No sign that he had spent even 1 minute alone with the sentence Elena had said in his backyard. "What I did," I repeated. "You made us believe you were in a serious accident." "Yes. You manipulated the entire family." I showed the entire family a mirror. "That's not what this was." "It is exactly what this was." He exhaled hard. "Elena has been in therapy since that night." I looked out my apartment window at the Sandia Mountains, purple in the late afternoon light, steady and uninterested in family performance. "Good," I said. "You think that's funny?" "No, I think it's overdue." "She was traumatized, Matt. She laughed when she thought I might die in a car accident. It was a joke." I closed my eyes for 1 second. There are phrases families use like emergency exits. Joke is one of them. Sensitive is another. Overreacting is a third. They do not open into safety. They open back into the same burning room. "I am not going to help you call that a joke," I said. "We say things. Everybody says things." "No," I said. "You say things when you think I'm not listening. That's different." He went quiet. I continued before he could rebuild himself. "Has anyone talked about what I heard in your backyard?" Another pause. "Everyone agrees you went too far." That wasn't my question. Gloria's blood pressure spiked. That also wasn't my question. "You owe Elena an apology." No. The word came out clean. Reuben did not seem prepared for it. "No. No, I am not apologizing because your sister had to sit with the emotional consequences of a sentence she said comfortably in public. She's your sister too." "I know," I said. "That's why I waited 31 years before finally believing her." His breathing changed. For a moment, I thought he might say something real. Then he said, "You always have to make yourself the victim." And just like that, the old machine started again. I looked at the folder on my table. The deed. The Hellick record. Grandma Isabel's letter. "No," I said. "I spent my whole life trying not to be one. That's what made me useful to all of you." Then I decided it was time. "There's something else we need to discuss," I said. "Grandma Isabel's estate." Reuben did not answer immediately. That told me he had been ready to fight about the hospital. He had not been ready for Grandma Isabel. "What about her estate?" he said finally. I looked at the folder on my kitchen table. For a second, I saw the house instead of the paper. The long backyard. The cracked side gate. Grandma Isabel standing at the stove with a dish towel over one shoulder, telling Reuben to stop tracking dirt across clean tile while he laughed like correction was affection. Then I said it. "She left me the house." The line went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that is not empty because a person on the other end is busy rearranging an entire future. "That's not possible," Reuben said. "It is." "No, she wouldn't do that." "She did." "You're misunderstanding something." "I'm not." "Matt, My name is on the deed, Reuben. He breathed once, hard. The probate transfer has been filed with the Bernalillo County Clerk. Fee simple. Clean title. No trust. No conditions. Another silence. This one was different. Less disbelief. More calculation. You're saying the house is yours? Yes. The house I live in? Yes. The family house. I closed my eyes briefly. There it was. Family house. The phrase people use when they want the emotion of shared history to overrule paperwork that does not favor them. It was Grandma Isabel's house, I said. Now it is mine. He made a sound under his breath. Not quite a laugh. Not quite anger. Something worse than both. She left it to you? Yes. Not me. No. I did not soften it. Softening would have been dishonest, and I had spent too many years mistaking dishonesty for peace. Reuben was quiet for so long, I checked the call screen to make sure it had not dropped. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. What are you going to do? I opened the folder. There will be a formal 60-day notice delivered. You're evicting me? I'm notifying you legally that the current arrangement cannot continue as it is. That sounds like eviction. It can become eviction if you refuse the second part. What second part? I'm offering you a 3-year lease below market rate. He said nothing. You would pay rent. You would follow written terms. You would be responsible for utilities and ordinary tenant obligations. The rent would reflect the fact that you lived there 8 years without paying rent, but it would also reflect that you made some improvements. So generous, he said. There was the old Reuben. Wounded only when accountability reached his driveway. No, I said. Fair. Generous was Grandma Isabel letting you live there for free. You mistook that for ownership. His voice dropped. You've been planning this. I've been understanding it. That house is all I have. No, I said. That house is what you assumed you had. He did not answer. So I gave him the part Grandma Isabel had given me. She wrote something in her letter. I said. He didn't ask. He assumed. Reuben's breathing changed. I waited. For once, I let the silence do the work he had always used volume to avoid. Reuben was quiet for a long time after that. Not the angry kind of quiet. I knew that one. The angry quiet in my family had weight behind it, like someone dragging furniture across a room before the next accusation arrived. This was different. This was empty at the edges. The silence of a man who had reached for his usual tools and found, for once, that none of them fit the shape of the problem. She wrote that, he asked. Yes. He didn't ask. He assumed. Yes. Another pause. Then, softer, why would she leave it to you? There were a dozen ways I could have answered that. Because I called her. Because you treated her house like a waiting room for your future. Because you confused being the loudest man in the family with being the one who mattered most. But Grandma Isabel had trusted me not to become cruel, just because truth had finally become available. So I chose the answer that hurt without needing decoration. Because she trusted my judgment. Reuben breathed out. A rough sound. Not crying. Not yet. Maybe never. Men in my family had never been taught how to grieve without turning it into whether everyone else had to survive. I said terrible things, he said. The sentence landed strangely. Small. Incomplete. Not enough. But real in a way his anger had not been. Yes, I said. You did. Elena said worse. And you laughed. He did not defend himself. That mattered. For the first time in my adult life, Ruben Alvarez let an accusation remain in the room without trying to cover it with volume. "I didn't think you heard us," he said. "I know. That doesn't make it better." "No," I said. "It just makes it honest." He was quiet again. Then he said, "I need to look at the lease. I'll send it through Marina." "Okay." Not warm. Not fixed. But the first honest word he had given me all week. 3 months later, Ruben signed the lease. Not gracefully. I want that understood. There was no movie scene where my brother arrived at my apartment with wet eyes, a folded apology, and a sudden understanding of 31 years of family gravity. Real people do not usually change that cleanly, especially not men like Ruben, who had spent half his life being treated like the final word in rooms where nobody made him earn it. There were 2 weeks of phone calls first, then silence, then a letter from an attorney Ruben hired, written in the careful language of someone who had reviewed Marina's paperwork and realized the dramatic version of the argument was not going to survive contact with the documents. The attorney did not threaten much. That told me plenty. He asked for clarification on the lease terms. He asked about the helic. He asked whether the 60-day notice was intended as immediate removal or a path toward formal occupancy. Marina answered everything. Cleanly. Precisely. Without emotion for anyone to grab and twist. In the end, Ruben signed. 3 years. Below market rate. Written tenant obligations. No right to sublease. No claim of ownership. No family events without my approval. That last clause caused the loudest reaction. I kept it. Because boundaries that disappear for holidays are not boundaries. They are decorations. Ruben mailed the signed copy through his attorney. No note. No apology. Just his signature at the bottom of a document that turned assumption into rent. When Marina emailed me the scanned copy, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time before opening it. I expected triumph. I did not feel it. What I felt was quieter. The house was not fixed. The family was not fixed. But for the first time in my life, the arrangement was honest. Elena called 4 weeks after the barbecue. I almost did not answer. Not because I was trying to punish her. Punishment requires more energy than I wanted to give. I simply looked at her name on the screen and realized that, for the first time in my life, I did not feel responsible for managing what would happen if I let it ring out. Then I answered. "Matt," she said. "Elena." There was a pause long enough for me to hear breathing, paper shifting, maybe a glass being set down. "I'm in therapy," she said. I heard. "Ruben told you?" "No. He told me you were in therapy because of me." She did not snap back. That was new. Instead, she exhaled slowly. "My therapist said that's not the full sentence." I waited. Elena had always filled silence quickly, with jokes, insults, performance, charm, anything to keep the room from asking her to stand still inside herself. This time, she let the silence exist. Then she said, "I'm in therapy because I said something cruel and then got scared when I had to feel what it would mean if it were true." The words sounded rehearsed. Flat in places. Careful in others. Like someone walking across a frozen pond, placing each foot exactly where she had been told the ice might hold. But rehearsed did not mean false. Sometimes people need help finding the honest sentence before they can say it in their own voice. "I should not have said what I said," Elena continued. "I should not have laughed. I should not have made your life and this family feel like something we tolerated instead of respected. My hand tightened around the phone. Not from anger. From the effort of not rescuing her from discomfort. I'm sorry, she said. I looked toward the window. Thank you for saying it. Do you forgive me? There it was. The old shortcut. I closed my eyes. Not yet. She was quiet. This time, she did not argue. That was the first apology I believed enough to let stand. Aunt Gloria never called. That surprised no one. Not Marcus. Not Marina. Not even me. Once I admitted surprise was just Hope wearing different clothes. Gloria did what people like Gloria do when accountability gets close enough to touch them. She made herself elderly, fragile, misunderstood, a woman from a different generation, as if cruelty were a birth year instead of a choice repeated often enough to become familiar. Ruben told me she said she was praying for me. I told him that was efficient because it meant she could speak to God without having to speak to me. Marco texted 6 weeks after the barbecue. Congrats on the promotion, man. That was all. No mention of the backyard. No mention of the hospital. No mention of laughing while my sister wished me dead in the same house my grandmother had left to me. I stared at the text for longer than it deserved. Then I wrote back. Thanks. Louise sent nothing. That was also an answer. For most of my life, I had treated scraps like invitations. A small text, a half apology, a joke that was slightly less cruel than the last one. I was done doing that. Some things are not hidden depths. Some things are exactly as shallow as they look. Marcus and I had dinner 3 weeks ago at a restaurant downtown. The kind of place with patio lights strung above the tables and traffic moving slowly enough on the street to feel almost intentional. September in Albuquerque can forgive a lot if you sit outside at the right hour. We ordered enchiladas, then wine, because Marcus said emotional property disputes required carbohydrates first and perspective second. He told me about a woman he had met at a healthcare conference in Denver. I told him about the house, the lease, the first rent payment, the 3-year plan, and the way Ruben's signature looked smaller on paper than his voice had ever sounded in a room. For a while, we sat without talking. That is one of the luxuries of old friendship. Silence does not ask to be explained. Then
老
Marcus
夫，我
looked
登
at
记
me
校正
and
立下
said,
说点歌
"Do you
的
think we
Ask
get it?"
on TNZ Radio
I
Mix。
watched a bus pass on Central Avenue, windows full of strangers going somewhere that had nothing to do with me. I don't know, I said. And I meant it. Maybe Ruben understood part of it. Maybe Elena would one day understand more. Maybe Gloria, Marco, and Luis would turn the whole thing into a story where I was still the problem, because some people would rather lose the truth than lose their role in a family. But for the first time, that did not decide anything for me. The house was real. The deed was real. The promotion was real. The peace I felt sitting across from Marcus, eating dinner without rehearsing how to be accepted, was real too. I used to think being understood was the doorway out. It wasn't. Leaving the door was.